Chapter 5, After the Applause. The world did not end. That was rude of it, really. After everything, the tadpoles, the cult, the chosen, the elder brain swelling over Baldur's Gate like some obscene god with delusions of architecture, Astarion had expected, if not an ending, then at least a proper pause. A moment. A breath. A tasteful curtain drop. Instead, the city survived in the usual Baldurian fashion, loudly, messily, and with immediate complaints about property damage. The docks smoked for days, roofs sagged where debris had fallen, streets filled with rubble, refugees, opportunists, heroes, liars, grieving families, pickpockets, and civic officials pretending they had been useful. People shouted over broken carts, priests rang bells, merchants reopened stalls beside scorch marks because apparently apocalypse was no excuse to lose a day's profit. Life, Astarion decided, was deeply inconsiderate. It went on. He stood in the shadow of an alley off the lower city, watching sunlight spill over the street he could no longer cross. That part had been less inconsiderate and more personally insulting. For a few impossible weeks, the sun had touched him. He had walked beneath it, complained beneath it, bled beneath it, pretended not to care while every golden hour settled on his skin like mercy with terrible manners. Then the tadpoles were gone. The brain was dead. The miracle ended. Sunlight became fire again. He had barely made it into shadow before the burning took him apart. Will had shouted. Karlach had cursed loud enough to frighten a surviving guard. Gale had done something frantic and magical with his hands. Shadowheart had dragged a cloak over him. Lae'zel had glared at the sun as if considering whether it could be defeated in honorable combat. Vesta had said his name. Not like Cazador. Never like Cazador. Astarion had laughed then, because what else was there to do while smoking under the open sky? Well, he had managed, voice stripped raw. That was fun while it lasted. No one had laughed. People were so difficult after near-death experiences. Now, days later, the burns were gone. His pride, unfortunately, had healed more slowly. He stood just beyond the sun's reach, watching it turn the street gold. A child ran through it, laughing. A dog chased after him. A woman leaned from a window and shouted something about muddy boots. Astarion looked down at his own hands, pale in the alley shadow. No blisters. No smoke. Safe, so long as he remained where the light could not touch him. There had been a time when that would have felt like a cage. Perhaps it still did. But the alley had 2 exits. The night would come. No one had locked the door. That mattered. He was learning to notice the difference. "You're brooding," Vesta said behind him. Astarion did not turn. "I am standing with dramatic intent." "You've been standing with dramatic intent for 20 minutes. "Then imagine how much intent I've accumulated." She came to stand beside him, stopping just short of the sunlight, not blocking it, not pushing him toward it, not apologizing for it, which was one of the reasons he tolerated her. Sometimes. Vesta held out a paper-wrapped parcel. Astarion eyed it. "If that is another medicinal pastry, I shall scream." "It's not medicinal." "Then it will be terrible for me." "Probably." He took it. Inside was a small iced cake from a bakery 2 streets over. One he remembered from before. Not the same owners, surely, not after 200 years. But the smell was close enough to make memory stir. Sugar. Rain. His mother breaking a stolen roll in half and giving him the larger piece. Astarion stared at the cake. Vesta pretended not to notice. Another irritating talent. "I'm not a wounded child," he said. "No." "I don't need consolation cake." "No. This is manipulation." "Probably." He looked at her then. She smiled, small and tired. Not triumphant. Not pitying. Just there. Astarion sighed extravagantly and broke the cake in half. He handed her the larger piece. Vesta looked down at it. Then at him. "Don't make anything of it," he said sharply. "I wouldn't dream of it." "You absolutely would." "Probably." He bit into his half before she could say anything worse. It was too sweet. It was perfect. The sun burned on the stones beyond him, bright and unreachable. Astarion chewed slowly, tasting sugar and shadow. The night did not ask him who he used to be. But apparently afternoons came with cake. That was something. He did not leave Baldur's Gate. Not immediately. That surprised him. He had expected to flee once the brain was dead, once the urgent little catastrophe of saving the world had ended and everyone began making noises about what came next. Running was familiar. Running had structure. Running required only a direction and a healthy disrespect for closure. But Baldur's Gate remained. Not home. Not yet. Perhaps never. But it was the place where too many doors had closed, and Astarion found, to his great annoyance, that he wanted to open some of them himself. He took rooms in the lower city. Not the palace. Never the palace. Tsar Palace stood empty now in the way corpses stood empty, a shape without the will that had animated it, still too full of what had happened there to be harmless. Legal authorities had made noises about seizure, inheritance, investigation, public safety, and whether anyone had a claim to the estate. Astarion had laughed until one of them stopped speaking. He wanted nothing from Cazador's house. No velvet. No marble. No portrait. No bed. No silver. No title. No throne. He took a narrow upstairs flat above a locksmith's shop because the irony amused him and the owner asked no questions beyond whether he paid in advance. He did. In coin. Mostly. The room had a crooked ceiling, a small hearth, heavy curtains, and a window that faced the alley instead of the street. No sunlight reached it directly after morning, and even then the curtains held. The lock was excellent. He had replaced it himself, then improved it, then added two smaller hidden catches, a bell wire, and a knife within reach of the bed. Healing, he had decided, did not require becoming careless. The first night there, he stood in the middle of the room and waited for something to happen. No one told him where to stand. No one told him to smile. No one asked what he had brought home. No one waited on what he would say. The silence stretched. Astarion looked at the bed. Then the door. Then the window. Then the bed again. Pathetic, he muttered. To the room. To himself. To Cazador's ghost, which was not present because Cazador was dead and Astarion refused to let him become decorative haunting. He sat on the floor instead, back against the wall, knife near his knee, curtains drawn, door locked. The quiet did not feel like peace. Peace, he suspected, had been invented by people with extremely boring lives. This was something else. Space, perhaps. He had learned that word before, with Vesta, with Araj, with the terrible realization that his body could belong to him even when he did not yet know what to do with it. This room was space. No role to play, no witness to please, no master to defy, no one watching. That should have been comforting. It was horrifying. Astarion sat in the dark and listened to the building settle. Pipes clicked. Someone downstairs laughed. A cart passed outside. Rain began after midnight, soft against the roof. He waited for a command. None came. He waited for the hunger to turn him cruel. It sat beside him, patient and old. He waited for grief. That came naturally. Grief had poor manners, but it did not devour him whole. Not that night. Not every night. He woke before dawn on the floor, stiff and irritated, still holding a knife. Still alive. Astarion stared at the ceiling. I suppose, he said aloud, voice rough with sleep he did not need, that counts. No one answered. For once, that was the point. Letters came from the Underdark. Not often. Not neatly. The first arrived tied to the leg of a bat with an expression that suggested it had seen too much and judged all surface dwellers accordingly. The handwriting was Deliria's. Of course it was. Petrus would have considered literacy too intimate. Leon would have reported facts as if filing to a superior officer. Violet would have written something charming and untrustworthy. Aurelia might have begun with an apology and never reached the news. Deliria wrote like a doctor observing an outbreak that happened to have names. Astarion read the first letter 3 times, then threw it onto the table, then picked it up and read it again. They had reached the lower caverns. There had been losses. Of course there had been losses. Some spawn had fled before any order could be made. Some had attacked. Some had been killed by creatures below. Some had walked into danger as if death were the first choice anyone had offered them, and they meant to accept before it was taken back. But many had stayed. Many had followed. There were ruins near an underground river, enough shelter, enough separation between those who could speak and those who could only hunger. Deliria had begun keeping lists. Leon had organized watches. Aurelia had found a way to calm some of the youngest. Yusin had surprised everyone by being useful with roots. Petras had been bitten twice and complained with such consistency that Deliria considered it a stabilizing influence. Astarion laughed at that, then hated himself for laughing, then decided generously that laughter did not have to be pure to be permitted. At the bottom, Deliria had written, "Sebastian asks if the surface still smells of rain." Astarion stared at the line for a long time, then he folded the letter carefully. He did not answer for 3 days. On the 4th, Vesta appeared at his door with ink, paper, and a look that made several lectures unnecessary. "I hate how much you assume," he said. "I know. It is one of your worst qualities. Top 5, surely. Top 3. She set the writing things on his table and sat by the hearth, not too close. Astarion glared at the blank paper. Letters were dreadful things, too much like confessions with better posture. "What am I supposed to say?" he asked. Vesta leaned back in her chair. "The truth. How novel. And if the truth is ugly, then write carefully." He dipped the pen. The first letter took an hour and contained only 4 sentences. "Yes, the surface still smells of rain. The bakery by the old courthouse is gone. The city is as loud as ever. I opened the door, but I know that does not make us even." He signed it, Astarion Ancunin, then stared at the name until the ink dried. His name. Not Cazador's. Not a command. Not a pretty sound in someone else's mouth. His. Vesta said nothing. Good. He would have bitten her. Probably not. Probably. The bat returned 2 weeks later. Sebastian's reply was shorter. "No, it does not make us even." Then beneath it, "Tell me about the rain anyway." Astarion sat very still. "Well," he said eventually, "demanding." Vesta looked up from sharpening a blade. "You're smiling." "I am absolutely not." "You are." It's a grimace of literary displeasure. "Of course." Astarion folded the letter, carefully. He wrote again that night. He fed differently now. That was a sentence with more effort inside it than anyone deserved to know. He still hunted. Of course he hunted. Blood was not a philosophical inconvenience. It was a need, and Astarion had spent too long being punished for need to pretend morality required starvation. But he chose. That word again. Irritating little thing. It kept appearing everywhere once one knew to look for it. He chose his streets, his targets, his limits. Baldur's Gate, fortunately, had never lacked for bad men in dark corners. Astarion did not consider himself a hero. Heroes had slogans. Heroes made speeches. Heroes got stabbed in dramatically inconvenient places because they believed in concepts before checking for traps. Astarion preferred practicality. A man following a girl through an alley with a knife in his sleeve. A patriarch's son who thought coin made consent optional. A smuggler who sold children to people who asked no questions. A murderer boasting over wine because Baldur's Gate loved nothing so much as a monster with a family name. Astarion drank from them. Not to death. Usually. He was not a saint, but he was careful. He listened for the boundary in himself now. The old roar of hunger, yes, but beneath it, the quieter thing that had first spoken at Vesta's throat. Enough. Some nights he listened. Some nights he did not want to. Some nights he stood over a body, fangs aching, and hated the restraint like another chain. But he stopped. Not always gracefully. Not always kindly. But he stopped because he chose to stop, and that made all the difference between hunger and obedience. Once, after dragging an unconscious dockside thug into a more visible street, where the flaming fist would find him embarrassed, pale and alive, Astarion returned to his rooms to find Vesta waiting on the stairs. He paused below her. "Do you make a habit of lurking outside men's rooms at indecent hours?" "Only family." The word hit him. She had been using it lately. Carelessly. Deliberately. Never in the old way. Never Cazador's ugly little family of spawn and commands. Never the smothering kind that insisted blood made love unavoidable. This was different. Found. Chosen. Annoying. Vesta saw his expression and lifted a brow. What? Nothing. Astarion. I am deciding whether to be offended. By family? By your presumption that I'm decent company. She smiled. He looked away first. She stood and descended 2 steps, stopping above him, not crowding. She had become very good at that. Did you feed? Yes, mother. The word left his mouth before he considered it. They both froze. Astarion's throat closed. Vesta's expression changed, but not too much. Thank the gods. Not too much. She did not reach for him, did not soften into pity, did not make the dead woman between them visible by saying the wrong thing. Instead, after a moment, she said, "Good. You get insufferable when you're hungry." Astarion stared, then laughed. It hurt. It helped. "Darling," he said, sweeping past her toward the door, "I am insufferable in all conditions. Do keep up." Vesta followed him inside. She brought bread, cheese, and wine she had no doubt acquired legally, which was tragic. Astarion lit the lamps, the room filled with low gold. They sat at his small table, Vesta eating, Astarion drinking wine because wine was not blood but had its own virtues. Neither mentioned the word. Not then. Later, after she left, Astarion sat by the hearth and thought of his mother's hands. The larger half of the roll. Little star. Cazador's mouth stealing it. Vesta on the stairs, letting the mistake pass without turning it into a wound. Some scars still spoke when the world went still. That night he listened. The next he did not. Both were allowed. That too was new. He saw himself eventually. Not in glass. Never in glass. The mirror remained empty, as stubborn and theatrical as ever. He had tried once, out of spite, to stand before a polished shop window at night with lamps behind him, wondering if some trick of angle or grime might give him anything. Nothing. The city, the street, the lamp. No face. No body. No proof. His first instinct had been grief so old it felt boring. His second had been rage. His third, unexpectedly, was irritation. Really? He had said to the window. Still? A passing drunk had apologized and hurried away. Astarion took that as a compliment. He began gathering reflections elsewhere. A tailor described the fall of a coat over his shoulders with reverence usually reserved for funerals. A child in the market told him his hair looked like moonlight and then tried to steal his purse. He let her get halfway before correcting her grip. Vesta said his smile had changed. Gale, on a visit, said he seemed less aggressively decorative, which Astarion chose to interpret as a medical diagnosis. Karlak threw an arm around him once and announced to an entire tavern that he looked like he might only bite half the room now, which was a gross slander. He could bite the whole room if properly motivated. Shadowheart said nothing, but one evening she looked at him across a table and nodded once, as if acknowledging a difficult spell successfully held. Lae'zel told him he stood with less fear in his spine. That one stayed with him. Against his will. And then there was Sebastian's letter. It came months after the first. Longer than the others. Messier. I told a child about the sky today. I got it wrong, probably. I said it was large. I could not think what else to say. There are some here who call you the opener. I told them not to make you into a myth. You would become unbearable. Astarion read that line twice, smiled, then stopped when the next words found him. I still hate you some days. I think I always will. But I am glad you opened the door. I am trying to decide whether those things can live in the same room. Astarion set the letter down. For a long time he did not move. Then he stood, crossed to the covered mirror in the corner, and removed the cloth. The glass reflected the room. The hearth. The chair. The table with Sebastian's letter. Empty space where Astarion stood. He looked at the absence. Once it had meant he was nothing. Now it meant the mirror was useless. How typical of furniture. He laughed softly, not because it was easy, because it was true. He could not see himself in glass. But Sebastian hated him and was glad. Vesta loved him and did not own him. The spawn below had begun turning his name into something he had not asked for and could not control. Lae'zel said his spine had changed. A child had nearly stolen his purse. There were worse mirrors. There were better ones. Astarion covered the glass again, not because he was afraid, because he was bored of asking empty things to give him proof. The city learned to whisper about him. It had done that before, of course. Mortal Astarion had loved whispers. Magistrate Ancunin, too pretty for the bench, too sharp for his age, too lower city for the robes, too ambitious, too charming, too much. Then the whispers had ended in a grave. Now they returned differently. A pale elf in the lower city. A night-walking monster who hunted worse monsters. A pretty devil with red eyes who left criminals trembling and bloodless in alleys. A hero. A murderer. A danger. A joke. A warning. Astarion encouraged none of it, except the flattering parts. And perhaps the inaccurate ones, if they amused him. He found to his surprise that some of the freed spawn wrote to him for advice. Worse, he answered. Not warmly, never warmly. One had to maintain standards. To the young spawn who asked whether hunger ever became bearable, he wrote, "No. But you become more interesting than it." To the one who asked whether they were damned, he wrote, "Probably. Try not to be tedious about it." To the one who asked whether he knew how to stop dreaming of cages, Astarion did not answer for 3 days. Then he wrote, "No. But I have learned to wake up somewhere else." This caused a very unfortunate development. They began listening to him, not obeying. He refused obedience with the intensity of a man who knew exactly how obedience rotted in the mouth. But listening, as if he had survived something in a way that might be useful. As if refusal had made him a kind of landmark. As if not ascending had not merely been a choice, but a shape others could stand near when deciding what not to become. Astarion found this deeply unfair. "I am not a leader," he told Vesta one evening. They were walking through the lower city after dark. Rain slicked the cobbles. The taverns were lit gold. Somewhere, someone played a fiddle badly and with great confidence. No? No. Leaders are earnest. They use words like duty without choking. They develop forehead creases. They die giving speeches. You do give speeches. I complain artistically. Of course. And I have no forehead creases. Tragic. Thank you. Vesta tucked her cloak tighter around herself. He watched the movement automatically, noting the cold, the tiredness in her shoulders, the way she pretended not to limp after long days, because apparently everyone he loved had the self-preservation instincts of a dramatic pigeon. Loved. The word no longer made him flinch every time, only sometimes. Progress was hideous. They don't need a ruler, Vesta said. They need someone who knows the cage was real and still opened the door. Astarion looked away. I did not do that cleanly. No. I nearly chose the ritual. Yes. I wanted to. I know. Stop being agreeable. It's unsettling. She smiled. You're not a leader because you were perfect. You're someone they look to because you weren't. How inspiring. Follow me, children. I am a cautionary tale with excellent hair. That sounds exactly like your style of leadership. He sniffed. I do have excellent hair. That sentence again. A door left open. No, he said, I don't. Then he went up the steps. The stone was damp under his boots. He stood where he had once stood as a young magistrate, basking beneath golden lamps, while his mother cried in the corridor and Cazador watched from a distance. My beautiful boy. Astarion closed his eyes. Grief arrived, not as a wound opening this time, as weather. A storm crossing old ground. He let it pass through. When he opened his eyes, the night remained. The road remained. Vesta remained below, waiting, not watching like Cazador, not counting. Only there. Astarion touched the stone railing. I was real, he said, very softly. The city did not answer. It did not have to. He knew. He visited the grave once. Only once. Perhaps he would again. Perhaps not. It was difficult to find. 200 years did unkind things to records, and Baldur's Gate had never treated graves as permanent promises. Still, Vesta knew people who knew people, and Gale knew archives, and Shadowheart knew how to look solemn enough that clerks became cooperative. Was not her grave. That would have been harder to find if it still existed at all. 200 years did unkind things to records, and Baldur's Gate had never treated poor women's graves as permanent promises. This was his. The place where she had stood, the place where she had said goodbye, the place where her love had been left behind with a body that did not stay buried. The stone had weathered badly. Astarion Ancunin. Beloved son. The rest was nearly gone. Astarion stood before it beneath a moonless sky. Vesta remained at the cemetery gate. She had offered to come closer. He had said no. She had nodded. The no had stood. He hated how much that still mattered. The grave itself was empty, of course. He had made sure of that personally by clawing his way out of it in screaming, hungry terror. A practical objection to sentiment. He knelt anyway. Hello, Mother, he said. The words felt ridiculous. Insufficient. Late. Very late. The grass shifted in the wind. Astarion stared at the stone. I survived, he said, then laughed under his breath. No, that sounds dreadful. You would ask whether I had eaten. I have, recently. Something terrible with a knife in an alley, but don't look at me like that. He deserved it. The dead did not look. He wished, suddenly and painfully, that she would. He wanted her to scold him, to say his cravat was too much, to tell him he did not have to become them. Astarion looked down at his hands. I nearly did, he said. The cemetery listened. I nearly became worse than them. His voice thinned. But I didn't. For a moment he felt young enough to be ashamed of needing praise from a woman 2 centuries gone. Then he decided shame had eaten enough. I didn't, he repeated. The wind moved through the grass. He took a small parcel from his coat. A sugared roll. Ridiculous. Perfect. He set it on the grave and broke it in half. Then, after a long pause, he took the smaller piece for himself. Don't make anything of it, he muttered. No one did. He sat there until the moon moved behind clouds and the city bells marked an hour he did not count. Some scars still spoke when the world went still. That night he listened. He did not answer every voice. Sebastian came to the surface in winter. Not alone. Never alone. Deliria sent warning first because she understood logistics and the dangers of surprising Astarion with ghosts in doorways. 3 spawn wished to see the city at night. Sebastian was one. Astarion read the letter, folded it, unfolded it, folded it again. Vesta, seated across the table with tea, watched this performance for longer than was strictly kind. Are you going to wear a hole through that paper? I'm considering it. Efficient. Thank you. Do you want me there? Astarion looked at her. There it was. Always the question. Do you want? Not should I, not I will, not you need. Do you want? He leaned back in his chair. Yes, he said. The word came more easily now. Not always. But sometimes. Sebastian arrived after midnight beneath heavy clouds, wrapped in a cloak too large for him, flanked by 2 other spawn who stared at the city as if it might bite. Which, in fairness, it might. He looked better. Not well. Better. There was more weight in his face, more focus in his eyes. Still anger there, yes. Astarion would have trusted him less if there were not. They stood in the shadow of an old archway near the river. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sebastian looked toward the distant lights of the city. You said it smelled of rain. It frequently does. You didn't say it smelled of sewage. I was being poetic. Sebastian's mouth moved, almost a smile. Astarion's chest did something inconvenient. I can leave, Astarion said. Sebastian looked at him. If you want to see the city without… No. The word was sharp. Then Sebastian seemed to hear himself and exhaled. No, he said again, quieter. Stay. Astarion went still. Vesta beside him did not move. Sebastian looked uncomfortable now. Good. Let someone else suffer awkward emotion for once. I am still angry, Sebastian said. Yes. I may always be. Yes. I do not forgive you. I know. But I wanted… He looked toward the river. I wanted to see whether the city was real. Whether you were real. Whether I had made all of it worse in my head. Astarion's voice came carefully. Had you? Sebastian's laugh was small and bitter. No. Fair. Astarion inclined his head. They walked. Not together exactly, but in the same direction. Vesta stayed near enough to be there and far enough not to make the moment hers. Sebastian looked at taverns, street lamps, stray cats, closed shops, the river catching fractured light. He asked almost nothing. The other 2 spawn whispered to each other in the underdark speech that was beginning to form below, patched together from old languages, hunger and necessity. Near dawn, before they returned to the hidden tunnels, Sebastian stopped outside a bakery just beginning its work. The smell of yeast and sugar slipped into the street. He closed his eyes. Astarion looked away. After a moment, Sebastian said, I thought about killing you. Astarion nodded. I assumed. Many times. Naturally. Still do sometimes. Good to know. Sebastian opened his eyes. Do you think that makes me a monster? Astarion looked at him then. Really looked. The anger, the hunger, the grief, the centuries in a cage, the fact that he was still here, asking not for permission, but perhaps for witness. "No," Astarion said. Sebastian's face shifted. Astarion continued, because apparently he had become the sort of person who said useful things at dawn outside bakeries. Horrifying. It makes you angry, hurt, sensible, arguably. Monsters are not made by wanting blood from the people who harmed you. Sebastian stared. What makes them? Astarion thought of Cazador, of the ritual, of his own hand hovering over the crown of hunger, deciding that pain gives you the right to spend everyone else. Sebastian looked away. The bakery door opened. A woman emerged with a tray, saw the odd little gathering of pale strangers, and wisely went back inside. Astarion cleared his throat. "I could buy something," he said. Sebastian glanced at him. "I don't eat." "No. But sometimes people want things that do nothing useful." The words hung there. Sebastian looked at the bakery, then nodded. Astarion bought sugared rolls for 3 spawn, who could not eat them, 1 for Vesta, who could, and himself, who took a bite out of stubbornness and memory. Sebastian held his roll like a relic. "This is absurd," he said. "Yes." "I don't forgive you." "I know." Sebastian looked at him. "But perhaps," he said slowly, "I can write again." Astarion swallowed. "That would be acceptable." Demanding. "I'm told it's one of my better qualities." "It isn't." Astarion smiled. "Not brightly. Not beautifully. Just enough." Sebastian almost smiled back. "Not forgiven. Not healed. Not safe. But here." The dark around them did not close. It opened wide. Years Astarion was beginning to suspect would not behave. He had expected the first year after Cazador to be a grand thing, a clear thing, the kind of measurable recovery bards could ruin with rhyme. Instead, it arrived in pieces. A night without dreaming of the vault. A joke that did not taste like blood. A letter answered the same day it arrived. A touch accepted without leaving himself behind. A no spoken without rehearsing the punishment. A yes spoken without hating himself afterward. He learned that quiet could be survived. He learned that grief did not always need an audience. He learned that love could be a hand near his shoulder and not on his throat. He learned that he did not need forgiveness from every ghost in order to set down the weight for an hour. Not forever. An hour. Then another. Then perhaps a night. He did not become whole. The very idea seemed suspicious. Whole things broke cleanly. Astarion had no interest in being cleanly anything. He remained patched, scarred, hungry, vain, funny at inappropriate moments, occasionally cruel in ways that made him apologize badly 3 days later. He still checked exits, still slept lightly, still kept knives in places that made Vesta sigh. He still missed the sun. Some nights, that grief was large enough to stand in the room with him. Some nights, he hated the dark. Some nights, he remembered that for a time he had walked beneath the morning and felt the whole world open on his skin. And losing it again seemed like a theft so intimate he wanted to break something beautiful. Other nights, the dark felt different. Not a coffin. Not the vault. Not Cazador's palace with its velvet mouths and locked doors. Just night. Wide. Cool. Unowned. A place to walk, a place to choose. One evening, near the first anniversary of Cazador's death, though Astarion refused to commemorate the man and simply acknowledged the date as an excellent excuse to drink something expensive, he climbed to the roof of the Elf Song again. The city spread beneath him. Alive. Unapologetic. Lit by lamps instead of sun, Vesta joined him with a bottle and 2 cups. "Roof's taken," he said. "I know. Still terrible manners." I learned from you. Then I remain a magnificent teacher. She handed him a cup and sat beside him. For a while they said nothing. The silence was easier now. Not always easy. Easier. Astarion watched the streets below. Somewhere, a group of young fools spilled from a tavern, laughing too loudly, alive in their own skins, and entirely unaware of how fragile choice could be. He did not envy them. That surprised him. He had envied the living for so long that the envy had become part of the wallpaper inside him. Their warmth, their sunlight, their simple arrogance of believing tomorrow would arrive because it usually had. But tonight, watching them, he felt something else. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Something learned, a quiet that had not been earned exactly, because suffering did not pay out wisdom like coin, no matter what priests implied, but learned. Slowly. Painfully. By not running from every room that contained him. You're brooding again, Vesta said. Reflecting. With great depth. Obviously. I am a complex and mysterious figure. You are eating icing from your sleeve. He looked down, so he was. He licked it off with dignity. Vesta laughed. Astarion looked at her. Her laugh had become familiar. Not safe in the old, impossible sense, nothing was perfectly safe, but known, chosen, a sound that belonged to nights he had decided to keep. You know, he said, when this began, I assumed you would die horribly. How flattering. Most people did. And now? He looked back over the city. Now. What a terrible, beautiful word. Now Cazador was dead. Now the palace was empty. Now 7,000 spawn were building something strange and dangerous below. Now Sebastian wrote letters that were half accusation and half weather report. Now Vesta sat beside him on rooftops and did not ask him to be simpler than he was. Now he had rooms with locks he chose, hunger he carried, a name he signed, scars he could not see and no longer needed translated to know they belonged to him. Now the night did not ask him who he used to be. It let him stand here and simply breathe. Astarion lifted his cup. Now, he said, I think your odds have improved. Vesta clinked her cup against his. How generous. I am widely known for my generosity. Widely? Do not sound skeptical. It wounds me. You'll survive, he smiled. Yes. Apparently he would. The lamps below flickered. The river caught their broken gold and carried it into the dark. Somewhere in the city, a door opened. Somewhere, another closed. Somewhere beneath the earth, thousands of hungry, frightened people learned what to do with freedom. Somewhere in a graveyard, a sugared roll had long since been eaten by birds or rot, or whatever gods tended offerings no one believed in. Astarion touched the rim of his cup. I am not whole, he said. Vesta turned her head. He kept looking outward. But I am mine. The words did not shake. That was new. Vesta did not answer immediately. Good. Some things deserved the dignity of silence. At last she said, Yes. Astarion looked down at the streets. No crown of teeth. No borrowed light. No master. No mirror. No script. Only shadow. Only the road ahead. He had once thought everything taken from him would have to be returned for him to become real again. The sun, the years, the faces, his reflection, his mother's voice untouched by Cazador's mouth, every door, every no, every body he had delivered, every version of himself that had died before the grave and after it. But not everything taken was meant to be returned. Some things were gone. Some losses remained losses. Some wounds did not close into beauty. Astarion had not been restored. He had been, instead, not the magistrate, Not the monster. Not the perfect ascended thing Cazador had tried to make possible. Instead, this. A pale elf on a rooftop with icing on his sleeve, blood in his past, hunger in his mouth, grief in his chest, and a future that had not asked permission before arriving. It was not glorious. It was honest. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps enough was not a small word after all. The dark did not close around him. It opened wide. For the first time, Astarion did not hide. He stood beneath the night, beside someone who loved him without owning him, above a city that had killed him and failed to keep him dead. No one watched from the shadows. No one waited to command his next line. No one told him where to stand. Astarion Ancunin chose his place at the edge of the roof, lifted his face to the moonless sky, and smiled. Not for survival, not for seduction, not for anyone else. Only because he wanted to.
The night doesn't ask me who I used to be. It lets me stand here and simply breathe. No doors to open, no role to play, no one waiting on what I'll say. I used to measure my worth and how well I survive. Now I wake up and I'm still alive. I am not old, but I am mine. I don't glow, I don't shine. I walk in shadow because I choose. Not everything taken is meant to be returned to you. Some scars still speak when the world goes still. Some nights I listen, some nights I don't. I don't need forgiveness from ghosts who fed. I carry the cost, but I set it down. There's a quiet now I didn't earn. It's not peace, it's something learned. Yeah, I'm not whole, but I am mine. No crown of tears, no borrowed life. I keep my hunger, I keep my name. I don't need power to walk away. If this is all I ever am, let it be enough. Let it be honest. I am still here when the noise is gone. No one watching, no one. Just an eye in the road ahead. I wasn't restored, I was instead. The dark doesn't close, it opens wide. And for the first time, I don't hide.